All right, so welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be looking at those excerpts you gave us from The Compound Effect and really kind of get into what Darren Hardy is trying to tell us. You're looking for the key takeaways here, right? Without having to read the whole book.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to pull out those golden nuggets of wisdom and figure out how to apply them.
Perfect. So one of the things that really struck me was the whole concept of the compound effect itself. These small, consistent actions, they add up over time to create huge results. It just sounds almost too simple to be true. But Hardy really makes a compelling argument.
Yeah, it is simple. And that's actually, I think, the beauty of it. It's not some, magic formula or overnight success. It's about just recognizing the power of consistency, even when it feels like what you're doing doesn't really matter that much at the moment.
Right. And he uses those examples of Scott and Brad to really hammer that home. Scott makes these tiny positive changes, like cutting out 125 calories a day, reading a little bit, walking a bit more. And over 31 months, he ends up losing 33.5 pounds.
It's amazing, right? And what's even more fascinating is how those small choices end up kind of rippling out into other areas of his life. It's not just about the weight loss.
Yeah.
You can imagine how much more confident he feels now that he can fit into clothes that he hasn't worn in years. He has more energy from moving his body more. He's getting that mental stimulation from reading. So it all kind of spirals upwards in a positive direction.
Yeah, like a chain reaction of good stuff. And then on the flip side, you have Brad, who's doing the opposite. Indulging a little more, skipping the gym, and those small choices compound negatively. They start affecting his work, his relationship, his well-being. It makes you realize that we really do have a lot of power when it comes to shaping our own lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that connects to one of Hardy's main points. He emphasizes taking 100% responsibility for our choices and what happens because of them. He's not saying to dwell on past mistakes, but rather to accept that we are the ones driving the car when it comes to our lives.
So no more blaming traffic or a bad mood on other people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we own our choices, we give ourselves the ability to make better ones. And those choices will lead to positive growth. It's about moving away from that feeling of being a victim and into a mindset where we're the creators.
And there's that story he tells about the Thanksgiving journal. He starts focusing on his wife's positive qualities, and as a result, their relationship really flourishes. It makes you wonder how often we just unconsciously focus on the negative, and we don't even realize we're creating this downward spiral.
It's a powerful reminder to pay attention to what we're thinking and doing, and then consciously choose to focus on what we want to see grow in our lives.
And speaking of mindset, what about luck? Hardy seems to have a different perspective on that than most people do.
Right. He sees luck as less about random chance and more of a combination of preparation and attitude, opportunity and action.
Yeah.
It's about being prepared when something good comes along, having the right mindset to actually recognize it as an opportunity, and then taking action to grab it.
Like he quotes Richard Branson saying, "The difference is when luck came my way, I took advantage of it." So it's not just about waiting for good things to happen. It's about putting ourselves in a position where luck can find us.
Exactly. It's about believing that we can create our own good fortune and then going out there and doing the things that will make it happen.
This makes sense. But I'm thinking about habits. They seem to play a big role here. If so much of what we do is driven by habits that we don't even think about, how much control do we really have?
Well, that's where Hardy's take on habits gets really interesting. He knows how strong they are, both good and bad. He compares them to the roots of a tree. The longer they've been growing, the stronger they get, and the harder it is to change them.
So if we've got these bad habits that are really ingrained, are we just stuck with them?
No, not at all. He provides practical strategies for identifying them, changing them, and even replacing them. One of the biggest things he addresses is what he calls the instant gratification trap. That tendency to go for the immediate reward, even when we know it's not good for us long term.
Oh, I know that trap all too well. So how do we get out of it? Is it just all willpower?
Willpower's part of it. But Hardy suggests that a big part is developing a strong why power. You got to have a strong reason, a deep motivation that pushes you to do the right thing and helps you resist that quick fix.
I love that example he uses about walking a plank. You'd walk across a plank for $20, right? But you wouldn't do it if it was between two skyscrapers, but you would do it in a second to save a kid's life. That's why power.
Exactly. When what we do comes from a place of deep meaning to us, we can overcome almost anything. So finding that why, that's the key to changing habits.
So where do we even begin? Changing habits can feel so overwhelming.
Hardy says you start by figuring out your core values. What really matters most to you? What principles are behind your decisions? When you're clear about your values, it makes those decisions a lot easier.
So like if I value being healthy, I'm not going to go for that second piece of cake, even if it looks amazing.
Exactly. Your values become the filter for your choices.
But sometimes values alone aren't enough. We need an extra push, right?
Totally. Hardy talks about finding your fight, something you're striving for, something you're pushing against, something that fuels your drive. It could be proving someone wrong, achieving a personal best, or just overcoming something that's been holding you back.
It's about channeling those feelings into action. Some people are competitive, some need to prove something to themselves, and others want to make a difference in the world.
Whatever it is that fight helps you overcome the obstacles and stay focused on what you want to achieve.
So we've got our why. We've defined our values, we found our fight. What's next? How do we make those changes actually stick?
That's where Hardy's techniques for building good habits come in. He's a big believer in making those changes fast and decisively, like jumping into a cold lake.
Burr, I get the picture though. It's better to just go for it than to slowly dip your toes in and hesitate.
Exactly. He's found that taking the plunge is way more effective both personally and professionally. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. Less time to think about it and more chance of success.
But what if you need to ease into change? What about moderation?
He acknowledges that you don't have to cut out everything you enjoy. He even suggests you don't need to completely quit a bad thing if you can still control it.
So enjoying a glass of wine with dinner isn't necessarily bad. But if you find yourself finishing the bottle every night, it might be time to rethink things.
Exactly. To see how much control you have over a habit, he recommends a vice fast. Pick one vice like coffee, alcohol, or social media and give it up for 30 days. If you find it super hard, you might want to think about quitting altogether.
It's like a test to see if those things are actually doing something good for you or holding you back.
Right. And when it comes to putting those good habits in place, Hardy has 6 key techniques. The first is to set yourself up to win. Make it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong one.
So if I want to eat healthier, I'll clean out the junk food and stock up on fruits and veggies.
Exactly. And if you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before.
Get rid of the obstacles and make it easy to do the right thing.
Got it. What's the second technique? It's about identifying and changing your triggers. Those are the things that make you start the bad habit. If you reach for chips when you're stressed, figure out what's making you feel that way and find a healthier way to deal with stress.
So maybe go for a walk, call a friend, do some deep breathing instead of reaching for the chips.
Exactly. The third technique is to focus on adding things in rather than taking them away.
That sounds a lot more appealing than deprivation. Tell me more.
Instead of thinking about what you're giving up, find something good to add to your life. That'll naturally replace the bad habit.
So if I want to watch less TV, I could start a new hobby, spend more time with family, or go to bed earlier. It's about filling that space with something more worthwhile.
Right. The fourth technique is to tell people about your goal. Tell your friends, family, or even post it on social media. Being accountable to others can really push you forward.
Like having your own cheering section and support system?
Exactly. The fifth technique is to use competition and teamwork to your advantage. Join a fitness challenge with friends, do a step counting contest at work, or find a group of people with similar goals.
There's something about a little friendly competition that really gets you going.
Definitely. And finally, the sixth, and maybe most important, is to be patient. Real change takes time. Be kind to yourself, celebrate the small victories, and trust that the compound effect is working in the background.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. Now, once you've started making those good habits stick, it's all about creating routines that make them automatic.
Routines. So we don't have to rely on willpower all the time.
Right. Routines help us make those positive actions automatic, so they become almost effortless. Hardy talks about building a pre-shot routine to start your day strong.
Like a golfer getting ready for that important shot, what would a good pre-shot routine look like?
Hardy suggests things like exercise, meditation, reading, and journaling in the morning. It's about preparing your mind and body to perform at your best. He also talks about a cash-out routine for the end of the day.
Cash out, like adding up the day's wins and losses.
Right. It's about taking a few minutes to look back at your day, check your progress, and plan for tomorrow. Did you stick to your goals? What do you need to change? What did you learn?
I like that. It's like wrapping up the day and getting yourself ready for a smooth start the next morning.
Exactly. And while routines are important for consistency, it's also a good idea to switch things up every so often, to keep it interesting and not get stuck.
So don't be afraid to try new things. Step out of your comfort zone and have a little fun.
Exactly. Hardy incorporates weekly rhythm registers to check in with himself and make changes, and monthly unexpected adventures to shake things up and keep them exciting.
It's all about finding that sweet spot between sticking to it and trying new things, structure and spontaneity.
Right. And now let's talk about pushing your success even further, going the extra mile.
You mean going above and beyond what's expected?
Exactly. It's about creating a big impact through unexpected generosity and exceeding expectations.
Like when Oprah surprised her whole audience by giving them all cars, or when Richard Branson launched Virgin Cola by driving a tank down Fifth Avenue.
Those are definitely memorable examples. But it's not always about huge gestures. It's about consistently surpassing expectations in all areas of your life.
Like those small things you do that show you care, like sending a handwritten thank you instead of an email, or learning some Portuguese to ask your future father-in-law for his daughter's hand in marriage.
Exactly. Those small acts of kindness and consideration can have a really big impact on your relationships and your reputation.
It shows people you're willing to do more, that you're not just going through the motions.
And that attitude over time can create amazing results.
I'm seeing the bigger picture now. It's not just about working hard, it's about working smart, finding those chances to make a real difference.
Exactly. And remember, going the extra mile doesn't have to be a big spectacle. Sometimes it's those small, consistent acts of generosity that make the biggest impact.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to start using some of these ideas in my life. What other things does Hardy talk about that can help us make the most of the compound effect?
One of the most important is the idea of pushing through what he calls the wall.
The wall. You mean those times when you feel like giving up?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that point when things get tough, doubts creep in, and you just want to quit. But Hardy believes that hitting the wall isn't failing. It's actually a defining moment for success.
So it's not about avoiding it, it's about what you do when you get there.
Exactly. He uses the analogy of a marathon. It's not the runners who don't get tired who win. It's the ones who can push through the pain and keep going when everyone else is ready to stop.
It's about finding that extra strength, both physically and mentally.
Right. And sometimes pushing through the wall means doing a little bit of what Hardy calls cheating.
Wait, I thought we were talking about ethical success. Now you're saying we should cheat.
Don't worry, it's not the kind of cheating you're thinking of. Hardy uses the word cheating to talk about finding creative ways to go beyond what we think we're capable of.
Yeah.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger would adjust his grip or lean back a little when lifting weights to get a few extra reps.
So it's about finding those little advantages, those creative workarounds that help us do more than we thought we could.
Exactly. It's about not letting those limits hold us back. And sometimes pushing through the wall means asking for help, using the support of others to get over the hump.
It takes a village, right?
Exactly. I think it's time for us to take a little break. When we come back, we'll dive into the final principle of the compound effect, the power of unexpected generosity.
Sounds good to me. We'll be right back after a short break.
Welcome back. Ready to explore how those small choices you've been making could be having a bigger impact than you think.
Totally. It's amazing how these concepts all connect.
Right. That's the beauty of the compound effect. It's like a whole system where all the pieces affect each other. And in this section, we'll be uncovering some of those less obvious things that can speed up or even sabotage your progress.
Okay, I'm listening. What are these hidden forces?
Hardy breaks them down into three main categories: input, associations, and environment.
Interesting. Let's start with input. What exactly is that?
It's about the information you take in the books. You read the podcasts, you listen to the conversations you have, even the news you watch. It's kind of like a mental diet.
So if I spend all my time on social media or watching reality TV, I'm probably not setting myself up for success.
It's not that you have to cut those things out completely. It's more about being aware of the balance. Just like eating junk food all the time is bad for your physical health. Taking in negative or just blah content can affect you mentally and emotionally.
Right. Hardy talks about how the information we consume shapes our thoughts and beliefs and ultimately our actions.
Exactly. He wants us to be more deliberate about what we let into our minds. Trade that mindless stuff for things that teach us something, inspire us, and motivate us.
So swap those gossip magazines for biographies of successful people, or trade those reality shows for documentaries that teach you something new and challenge how you think.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a total upgrade.
I like that analogy. And it's not just what we take in, it's also what we avoid.
Right. Hardy's a big advocate for not watching or reading too much negative news.
Yeah.
He says that constant stream of bad news can really mess with your mindset and your well-being.
It's easy to get caught up in all that negativity, especially these days. So maybe just check the news once a day or choose sources that focus on solutions and positive stories.
Exactly. It's about protecting your mental space,
Right.
making sure you're not overloading on negativity.
Okay, I'm ready to clean out my mental junk food and stock up on some inspiring stuff. Now, what about associations? How do those play into this?
This is where things get really interesting. Hardy talks about how much the people we spend time with affect us. He calls this our reference group. Think about your close friends, your family, your colleagues, even the people you interact with online.
He mentioned some research that says our reference group can influence as much as 95% of our success or failure in life. That's a huge number.
It really is. And it shows how important it is to be careful about who we let into our inner circle. Hardy and his mentor, Jim Rohn, both believe that we become the average of the 5 people we're around the most.
So if we're hanging out with people who are negative, unmotivated, or just not inspiring, we're likely to pick up those same traits.
It almost always happens. We unconsciously absorb those beliefs, habits, and attitudes. It's a subtle but powerful influence.
Like osmosis, we soak up the qualities of our surroundings, both the good and the bad. So if we want to improve our lives, we need to surround ourselves with better people. Exactly.
Spend less time with the energy drainers and more time with people who lift you up, inspire you, and challenge you to grow. Find mentors, join groups, and connect with people who are already living the kind of life you want.
It makes you realize how important it is to be picky about the company you keep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the third category, environment.
Environment. So it's not just the people, but our physical surroundings too.
Exactly. Hardy argues that our physical space can have a big impact on how we act, our mood, how productive we are, even our overall sense of well-being.
I know, I definitely feel a difference when I'm working in a cluttered, messy space versus a clean, organized one.
Exactly. A messy environment can drain your energy and make it harder to focus, while a clean and nice-looking space can improve your mood and start creativity.
So it's not just about cleaning your desk, it's about making your space work for your goals and dreams.
Exactly. Think about the colors, the lighting, the furniture, even the smells in your space.
Mm.
Do they energize you, inspire you, create a sense of calm and focus?
It's about setting yourself up for success. And it's not just our homes and offices, it's also the neighborhoods we live in, the places we eat, the stores we shop at, even the things we do for fun.
It's about being intentional with every part of your environment and making sure it matches your values and what you want to achieve. Hardy even talks about how moving to a new city can really change things for people.
It makes you wonder how much our environment shapes us without us even realizing it.
And it's not just our physical environment, it's our internal one too, our thoughts, emotions, and self-talk.
So it's about having a positive mindset, practicing gratitude, silencing that inner critic, all those things we hear about but don't always do.
Exactly. Our internal environment is just as important as the external one. Hardy wants us to pay attention to our thoughts, challenge those negative voices, and try to be more positive and optimistic.
Like building a mental shield to protect us from negativity and self-doubt. And it all comes back to that idea of taking full responsibility for our lives.
Exactly. It's about realizing that we get to choose our thoughts, words, and actions, and those choices shape our reality.
Wow, this is all making so much sense. Input, associations, environment. They all work together to create the compound effect in our lives.
Exactly. And by understanding these principles, we can take control and create the lives we want.
This is incredible. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Now that we've looked at some of those less obvious forces at work, are you ready to dive into some practical strategies to actually put these principles into action and start getting those momentum-building results?
Absolutely. Let's get to the action steps.
Okay.
So let's get to those action steps. What are some practical things we can do to really make this compound effect work for us in our lives?
Hardy has one tip that is super impactful and surprisingly simple. It's all about tracking.
Tracking, like keeping a record of our habits, behaviors, and how we're doing with our goals.
Exactly. It's about paying attention to those little things we often brush off as not important. But those little things over time can create big results.
Because what gets measured gets managed right.
Right? When we track our progress, we become more aware of what we're choosing and how it affects us. It highlights those areas where we might not even realize our habits are shaping things.
Like if you're trying to lose weight, keeping a food journal helps you actually see what you're eating, and just being aware of that can lead to better decisions.
Exactly. And it's not just about tracking the good stuff. It's about those missteps too.
Yeah.
Getting an honest look at where we're at so we can figure out what to improve.
Hardy tracked everything from how much money he spent to the number of sales calls he made, even the compliments he gave out.
It might seem a little over the top, but it shows how powerful it can be to be really aware of what we're doing. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Find a system that works for you, a notebook, a spreadsheet, an app, whatever works.
So what are some things we should be tracking?
It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. But some common things are your spending, your eating habits, exercise routine, how you're sleeping, your time on social media, even your progress on a project or a goal.
It's like taking stock of your life, seeing where you're investing your energy and resources.
Exactly. And when you start tracking, don't forget to celebrate those wins no matter how small.
Celebrate? Do we need to throw a party every time we hit a milestone?
Not necessarily, but it is important to recognize and appreciate those victories, big or small. Hardy calls it catching yourself doing something right.
Because we tend to focus on the negative, right? What we're doing wrong, where we're messing up.
Exactly. It's called negativity bias. We're naturally wired to pay more attention to threats, problems, mistakes. But if we want to create lasting positive change, we got to train our brains to see the good stuff too.
So instead of beating ourselves up over a slip-up, we should celebrate that we're making an effort, that we're heading in the right direction, even if it's just one step at a time.
Exactly. And when we celebrate those wins, we create this positive cycle that makes us want to keep going.
Like giving ourselves a little pat on the back for a job well done.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just take a moment to enjoy that feeling of accomplishment. Tell a friend about it, or even just do something nice for yourself.
Okay. I'm all for celebrating those wins. What other things can we do to boost those positive results?
Hardy is big on momentum. He calls it the Big Mo, and he believes it's one of the most powerful forces out there. And it totally applies to our lives too.
Momentum, that feeling of things moving forward without effort, like a snowball rolling downhill, getting bigger and faster as it goes.
Exactly. He uses the example of a train. It takes a ton of energy to get a train moving from a stop. But once it gets going, it's almost impossible to stop.
So how do we create that kind of momentum in our own lives?
The key is consistency. Hardy says it's super important to take action every single day, even if it's just a tiny step.
Because those small steps done consistently over time are what builds massive momentum.
Exactly. Find those key actions that will move you towards your goals and commit to doing them every day, no matter what.
So if I want to write a book, I need to write something every day, even if it's just for 15 minutes. And if I'm building a business, I need to do something every day towards that goal, even if it's just making a few calls.
Exactly. It's about building that habit of consistent action, showing up every day, even when you don't feel like it.
Because consistency is what creates those small wins that add up over time, thanks to the compound effect.
Exactly. And as you start seeing those results, it keeps you motivated and makes it easier to stick with it. It becomes a self-fueling cycle of success.
I'm really starting to see the power of this idea. It's not about finding a quick fix or some magic trick. It's about committing to the process, trusting the journey, and letting the compound effect do its thing.
Exactly. And that's what Darren Hardy's book is all about, giving us the tools to take charge of our lives and build the futures we want one small step at a time.
This has been an awesome deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the compound effect and how to use it.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you. Remember, start small, be consistent, and never underestimate the power of those little actions.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the compound effect. We hope you've learned something valuable and are ready to start creating your own success story one step at a time.
And until next time, keep compounding that success.